Hello, friends. So, we are in revising energy. And what that means is that this is the time in our creative cycle when we look back on what we've produced and we really think about how are we going to make this as effective as possible for our ideal audience. I don't believe in perfect. I don't think that's a thing. So, get out of your head the idea that this is ever going to be perfect. However, we can make it as effective as possible for our audience. And that's what we do in the revising period. We are stepping empathically into the shoes of our ideal audience and just looking at what we've created and thinking, how does this take me from where I'm stuck to where I really want to be? Because that is what all of your value that you are providing for your audience should do. It should get them out of something that they are stuck in, an emotion, a situation, a limiting belief, and into what they really want to be feeling and experiencing, their true desire. So when we think about revising, we often think about cutting. We think about what are we going to get rid of? What does not need to be here? And that's very important. But we can't start there. We can't start there. We have to start with what needs to be here. What is the core of what we're actually doing for our audience, the value that we are providing to our audience? I often talk about this as the golden apples. So some people say golden nuggets. I say golden apples just because a lot of my metaphors revolve around plants and gardening. Because what we're looking at in the 4-part cycle is really the cycle of nature. It is the natural cycle. It's the cycle of life, okay? And so the revising period is that harvest period. It is that period where all the fruits of our labor are here. We see this beautiful orchard that we have grown, that we have produced. And now we're going through and we're picking out what are the golden apples for our audience. Let's say our audience wants an apple pie. That's their desire. They want to experience that delicious, wonderful, sweet, tart perfection that is an apple pie. And so what we're doing is just going through our orchard and figuring out where are the best apples for this audience at this time. Now, a lot of what we produced, we may discover, was actually just for us. It wasn't necessarily for our audience. When we go through the process of pouring out what's inside of our heart and inside of our head, we discover a whole lot of stuff up there that was actually just for us, that we needed to identify, acknowledge, experience, work through, process. And it wasn't necessarily for our audience. The experience of processing it is what got us to the message that we really had for our audience. And so you don't actually need to include that entire story. In fact, sometimes what we're doing is just re-traumatizing our audience unnecessarily. If we're giving them all the details of a trauma that we experienced, for example, it's probably just going to re-trigger a trauma that they've experienced that was similar and put them into a state of mind where they're not able to process very well and they're not able to take in the lesson that we have for them. And so sometimes it's actually more effective to take out all the details, the gory details of a trauma story, and just focus on the emotional arc of what we experienced, how we were stuck, and where we ended up, so that the audience can take that journey along with us and then feel that liberation along with us, the tension and the release. Every good story has those two things, tension and release. So when we're looking at revisions, what we're looking at is what is the core message, what is the core tension, and what is the core release. And when you identify that kind of golden nugget for each section of what you are building, then you can say to yourself, oh, okay, this is how this gets my audience from here to here. How does everything else in this chapter support that? And so you go through each section of what you've created and look at how does this actually support that main thing that I'm trying to do. So let's get out of writing. Let's talk about, let's say you're building a house, okay? You're building a house. Each room has an intention. Each room has a purpose for your ideal residence. Okay, so if you're in the kitchen, and the ideal purpose here is nourishment, we're creating nourishment for the people who live here and everyone that they want in turn to nourish. Then everything in this kitchen needs to support that. If there's something in this kitchen that does not support nourishing your ideal residence, then that doesn't need to be in that room. This is the same for every part of our lives. When we are going through our things and tidying up, I want to Marie Kondo something and think, does this spark joy? Right? We look at something and we say, does this spark joy for me? And if it does, and we find things that do spark joy, do the other items in this space support that joy? Do they support this object giving me more joy, or do they get in the way of it? And so you want to find those golden objects as well, those golden apples within your home. What is the golden apple of this room? What is the focal point of this room? Is it the television? Is it the oven? Is it the bed? Right? And how does everything else support that golden apple of the intent of this room? So this is a way of looking at just everything, not just revising your work. This is how we revise our lives. We look at what really needs to be here. What are my core values? What are my core desires? And looking at how does everything else that I have in my life support directly those values, those goals, those desires. And if they don't, then they don't need to be here. And that's not a judgment. That's not a evaluation of that thing. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it toxic? It doesn't matter. If it's not serving your intention currently, then it doesn't need to be here. It just doesn't need to be here. You're wasting its time and your own. And so you can let go. You can let go of those things that don't need to be there anymore. And that, in turn, opens up a space for new opportunities. I just went through this process of cleaning out my kitchen. Now, this kitchen had not been cleaned out in a very long time. And I discovered some things in there that were disturbing. But we have moved on, gotten rid of those things that don't need to be there anymore. We had several different kinds of basically the same shape of cake pan. We don't need that. We're not a bakery. We're not going to be making multiple cakes at once. Someone else might be doing that, and so I've given those away to somebody else who can use those. But now I have this shelf that's open, and I'm leaving it open for now. I'm waiting for that space to be filled with something that really supports the intent of this kitchen for me. And for me, creativity is an important thing that I experience in my kitchen. It's not just nourishing people, it's a place where I express my creativity. And so everything in that kitchen, I want to support my creativity in the kitchen. So this is something that you can do in every aspect of your life, and that invites new opportunities around those clear intentions that you've set. Now that you've cleared out space, you've set that intention, here's my shelf. I want to invite things that inspire my creativity, that support my creativity in the kitchen. I don't know what'll show up, but I know when it does, I'll recognize it, and I'm going to put it on that shelf. So this is how we invite the right kinds of synchronicities and opportunities into our lives, is we clear out space in its revising process, and we recognize, what are my golden apples? What are the core of my intentions? And how can I find other things that support this, that help that dream come to life? I hope this has been helpful to you, my friends. I would love to hear the golden apples that you are discovering in your own work. I would love to hear about how the other things that you're creating are supporting those golden apples of your desires, of your values. Please come into the Innovators Guild and share with us what your golden apples are and how what you're creating supports those. Badass-te, my friends. Badass-te.